Have you noticed that some relationships feel different lately? Not because anybody did anything wrong, but because you're changing. And when you change after 50, some relationships grow with you and some don't. By the end of this video, you'll be able to recognize which relationships are supporting your growth, which ones are adjusting, which ones are holding you back, and which ones may have simply run their course. If we're just meeting, I'm Dr. Linda, retired educator, former nonprofit leader, breast cancer survivor, and like many women in this community, I've had to reinvent myself more than once. Now I help women over 50 navigate life's transitions and create a meaningful next chapter without burning down everything they've spent decades building. As always, timestamps are listed below for your convenience, so let's get started. Today, we're talking about a part of reinvention that catches many women off guard. Sometimes this is one of the hardest parts of personal growth because while you may have expected your life to change, you may not have expected your relationships to feel different also. Something I've noticed over the years is that many women assume relationship changes means someone did something wrong. Maybe you're wondering, am I becoming difficult? Am I pulling away? Am I expecting too much? Or maybe you're wondering whether the other person has changed. But often, neither explanation is completely accurate. What's actually happening is much simpler. You're changing, and as a result, that change creates contrast. The version of you that existed 10 years ago may have wanted different things, tolerated different things, needed different things, and believed different things. And now you're growing, and you're asking questions of yourself. You're becoming more honest at setting new boundaries. And you're exploring possibilities you may never have considered before. The challenge is that relationships tend to develop around familiar versions of us. For years, everyone knows their role. Everyone knows the script. Everyone knows what to expect. And then one person starts changing and suddenly nobody's quite sure where they fit anymore. Not because they don't care or because they don't love you, but because growth changes the relationship dynamic. It's not betrayal, it's contrast. Looking back, I think many women misunderstand what's happening during this stage. They interpret contrast as conflict, but they're not the same thing. Just because a relationship feels different doesn't mean it's unhealthy, and just because someone struggles with your growth doesn't mean they're against you. Just because you're changing doesn't mean you've become selfish. Sometimes growth simply reveals differences that were always there. Differences in values, priorities, goals, and how each person wants to spend the next chapter of their life. Those differences become more visible because you're becoming more visible. You're becoming more of yourself, and that's when relationships begin responding in different ways. This is where understanding the 4 categories of responses becomes incredibly helpful, because once you recognize which response you're dealing with, you stop taking everything personally, and you start making decisions from clarity instead of confusion. Response number 1 is the champion. These are the people who celebrate your growth. They may not fully understand every decision you're making, and they may not always agree, but they genuinely want good things for you. They cheer your success, and they support your exploration, and they don't require you to stay small in order to stay connected. If you have even 1 or 2 champions in your life, appreciate them. They're often the people who help carry us through major transitions. Response 2 is the adjuster. These people care deeply about you, but they need a little time. Your growth has changed the relationship, and they're trying to figure out what that means. Sometimes they ask awkward questions, or sometimes they seem uncertain. Sometimes they pull back temporarily, not because they want to lose the relationship, but because they're learning how to relate to this newer version of you. Many healthy long-term relationships fall into this category. What they often need is patience, not the kind of patience that requires you to stop growing, just enough patience to allow the relationship to adapt. Response 3 is the anchor. This one surprises many women. Anchors often love you very much. The challenge is that they feel safest when things stay familiar. They miss the version of you they've always known. They may say things like, "You've changed. I miss the old you. Are you sure this is a good idea?" And what they're often expressing isn't criticism, it's uncertainty. They don't know how this new version of you fits into the relationship. And that can be difficult for both people. One of the hardest questions reinvention eventually asks is, can I continue growing while remaining in this relationship? Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes it's no, and sometimes the answer hasn't revealed itself yet. Now, if you're a woman over 50 trying to figure out what's next, that's exactly why I created this channel. Every week we talk about confidence, purpose, relationships, creating a meaningful next chapter. So if that sounds like something you need right now, subscribe and join us. Now, let's talk about the response that many women find both the hardest and ultimately the most freeing. Response 4 is the completed chapter. Some relationships quietly come to completion. They're completed chapters, but it doesn't mean they didn't matter. It doesn't mean anyone failed. Life simply moves in different directions. One thing I noticed after retirement was that some relationships naturally changed. I believe relationships serve different purposes in our lives. One thing age has taught me is that not every meaningful relationship is meant to last forever. Some people walk with us through a chapter, some stay with us for several chapters, and a few stay with us for the whole book. And part of growing older is learning to appreciate what a relationship gave you without demanding that it remain exactly as it always was. A completed chapter isn't a failure, it's simply a chapter that served its purpose. And there can be gratitude in that. I felt some of this after I retired. Retirement is strange because people talk about it like it's only about leaving a job, but it's also about leaving a whole ecosystem. You leave the routine and the structure and the conversations and the shared problems and the people who saw you in a certain role every day. For almost 30 years, so much of my identity was connected to education leadership, responsibility, and being needed in a particular way. And when that chapter ended, some of the relationships naturally changed. Not because anyone did anything wrong, but because the context changed. The daily connection was no longer there, and the shared mission was no longer there. The version of me they knew in that setting was no longer the version they interacted with every day. And I had to learn that some relationships were deeply meaningful inside that chapter, but they were not all meant to carry the same weight into the next one. That doesn't make them less valuable. It makes them honest. Understanding what's happening doesn't solve everything overnight, but it does help you stop assuming that every relationship change means something's broken. Sometimes it's simply evidence that you're growing. Okay, if you follow my videos, you know I'm not going to let you just watch this and go back to your week. Here's what I'd like you to do. Think about 3 relationships in your life that feel different today than they did a few years ago. For each one, ask yourself, which response best describes this relationship? Is this person a champion, an adjuster, an anchor, or a completed chapter? And then ask, what does this relationship genuinely need from me right now? And before you stop there, turn the question back toward yourself. In 1 or 2 relationships, ask yourself, which role am I playing in someone else's life? Am I being their champion, their adjuster? Am I acting like an anchor without realizing it? Or have I become part of a chapter that may complete? That question matters because relationship change is rarely one-sided. Sometimes we're so focused on how other people are responding to our growth that we forget to ask how we're responding to theirs. And finally, ask yourself, what conversation am I avoiding that might create more clarity? You don't want to have the conversation today, but it's worth knowing what it is. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which category caught your attention most while you were watching? Was it the champion, the adjuster, the anchor, or completed chapter? Let me know. Before you go, I want to make sure you have something practical to help you navigate this season. Because relationship changes rarely happen in isolation. They're usually part of a larger transition. That's why I created a free reinvention roadmap and the free next chapter quiz. Both are designed to help you understand where you are in your next chapter journey and identify a meaningful next step. You'll find both links below. There's nothing to purchase. Both are absolutely free. Before we finish, I want to acknowledge something. Over the last several videos, we've talked about confidence, boundaries, self-sabotage, letting go, reinvention, and now relationships. And underneath all of them is the same thread. This was never about changing your life overnight. It was about seeing yourself more clearly, because clarity often comes before change. And once you start seeing yourself differently, the next question becomes harder to ignore. What now? Once you begin changing, relationships aren't the only thing that start to feel different. For many women, the next question is about work. The work they've done, the work they no longer want to do, and the work they may still feel called to do. Maybe you're nearing retirement, maybe you're already retired, or maybe you've built a career and suddenly wonder, what comes next? In the next video, we're going to talk about how to reinvent your work life after 50 without throwing away everything you've already built, because starting over and starting fresh are not the same thing. This chapter of life isn't about becoming who you used to be. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. I'm Dr. Linda, and I'll see you in the next video.